17 times. That is the number the coroner gave me. It wasn't just a number. It was the amount of times my entire universe was punctured, deflated, and destroyed. But the worst part wasn't the report. It wasn't the cold steel table where I had to identify her. The worst part was what the neighbor told the police. She said that while it was happening, while my wife Ivy was screaming for her life, she heard them laughing. They were having fun. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. I remember the smell of the hallway before I even opened the door. It was metallic, copper and rust. A smell I knew too well from 3 tours in the desert, but a smell that never, ever belonged in my suburban home in Seattle. I had been gone for 6 months. My deployment was supposed to end in 2 weeks, but I had pulled strings. I called in every favor I had with the command to get home early. I wanted to surprise her. Ivy was 8 months pregnant. We were going to name him Leo. I had the crib set up in my mind, imagining how I would walk through the door, drop my duffel bag, and just hold her. I needed that peace. I needed her softness to wash away the grit of the chaotic world I operated in. I stood outside my front door, my hand trembling as I reached for the knob. It was unlocked. That was the first alarm bell. Ivy was careful. She was the daughter of a police officer. She locked everything, always. I pushed the door open with my boot. The house was silent. Not the peaceful silence of a sleeping home, but the heavy, suffocating silence of a grave. Ivy, I called out. My voice cracked. I didn't want to walk further, but my legs moved on their own, guided by muscle memory and a rising, choking dread. The living room lamp was knocked over. The vase we bought on our honeymoon in Italy was shattered across the hardwood floor. And then I saw the trail. Dark, wet smears leading toward the kitchen. I followed it. I felt like I was floating outside of my body, watching a man walk toward his own destruction. I found her in the kitchen. I won't describe everything I saw. Some things you don't put into words because words are too small to hold that kind of horror. But I saw her hand first. Her left hand, reaching toward the phone that had been kicked under the refrigerator. Her wedding ring was gone. They had taken it. Ivy. I dropped to my knees. The impact bruised my shins, but I didn't feel it. I slipped in the blood. Her blood, my son's blood. I pulled her into my lap. She was cold. So cold. The life had left her hours ago. I screamed. It wasn't a human sound. It was the sound of an animal caught in a trap, realizing the bone is broken and there is no escape. I rocked back and forth, holding her sticky, cold body against my chest, my tactical uniform soaking up the blood of the only person in the world who made me feel human. The police arrived 10 minutes later. I don't remember calling them. Maybe the neighbors did when they heard me screaming. The next few days were a blur of gray suits, flashing blue lights, and pitying looks. I hated their pity. I sat in the interrogation room, not as a suspect, but as a victim. The detective, a man named Miller, looked tired. He had coffee stains on his tie and eyes that said he had seen too much and done too little. We believe it was a gang initiation, Mason, Miller said, sliding a folder across the metal table. A group called the West Side Kings. They've been hitting homes in the area, usually just robbery. This went wrong. Went wrong. I whispered. My voice sounded like gravel grinding together. They stabbed her 17 times, Miller. That's not a robbery gone wrong. That's sport. Miller sighed, rubbing his temples. We have leads. But these guys, they don't leave fingerprints. They wear masks. And the neighbors? They're terrified. Nobody saw faces. Just a black vent speeding off. I stared at the two-way mirror, seeing my own reflection. I looked hollow. My eyes, usually sharp and alert, looked dead. One neighbor heard something. I said, Mrs. Gable. Miller nodded. She's 80 years old, Mason. Her testimony won't hold up in court. She said she heard laughing. That's it. Laughter. The word echoed in my skull. It bounced around, growing louder and louder. While my wife lay dying, while she begged for the life of our unborn son, they were laughing. The funeral was on a Tuesday. It rained, Because of course it did. It felt like the sky was mocking me. A closed casket. Two of them. One full size, one tiny. My squad from the teams came. Guys I had trusted with my life in the worst hellholes on earth. Hunter, Blake, and even Felix, my business partner. They stood around me, a wall of black umbrellas and stoic faces. Felix put a hand on my shoulder. We'll find them, Mason. The cops will do their job. And if they don't? I asked, staring at the wet dirt piling up on the mahogany wood. Then we handle it, Felix said. He sounded sincere. But you need to grieve, brother. Don't do anything stupid. You have a business to run. You have a life. A life? What life? They put my life in that hole in the ground. 2 weeks passed. The phone call stopped. The flowers withered on the porch. The house was empty, and the silence was deafening. I spent my nights sitting in the dark in the kitchen, staring at the spot where I found her. I scrubbed the floor until my knuckles bled, but I could still see the stain. It was burned into my retinas. I went to the police station every morning. Every single morning. Nothing new. Mason, Miller would say, barely looking up from his paperwork. We're working on it. You're not working on it. I snapped on the 15th day. You've moved on. You have fresh bodies, fresh cases. My wife is just a file number to you now. We have protocols. Miller shouted back, standing up. We can't just kick down doors because you have a hunch. We need evidence. Evidence, I repeated. I walked out of the station. The rain had stopped, leaving the city gray and damp. I got into my truck and sat there, gripping the steering wheel until the leather creaked. They wanted evidence. They wanted protocols. They wanted me to wait for a justice system that was designed to protect the rights of the monsters who killed my family. I drove home, but I didn't go inside. I went to the garage. I moved the old paint cans and the gardening tools aside. Behind a false wall I had built 3 years ago, I found it. My footlocker. I dragged it out. It was heavy. I flipped the latches and opened it. The smell of gun oil and canvas hit me, a comforting scent. Inside was my past, my armor, my tactical knives, my surveillance gear, the tools of a trade I promised Ivy I would leave behind. I picked up a combat knife. The blade was cold, heavy, and perfectly balanced. They laughed. I whispered to the empty garage. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from the Neighborhood Watch app. A post from Mrs. Gable, the old neighbor. Saw a blue sedan parked down the street again tonight. Same one from that awful night. Nobody believes me. I stared at the screen. The police had dismissed her. They said she was senile. They said she was confused. I wasn't the police. I grabbed a black hoodie and a pair of gloves. I didn't take a gun. Not yet. Tonight wasn't about ending it. Tonight was about beginning it. I walked out into the night, slipping into the shadows like I had done 1,000 times in foreign lands. But this wasn't a foreign land. This was my home, and I was about to declare war on it. I moved through the alleyways, silent, invisible. I reached the end of the street where Mrs. Gable lived. And there it was. A beat-up blue sedan, engine idling, lights off. Smoke curled from the driver's side window. I crept closer, keeping low behind the parked cars. I could hear music thumping from inside the car. Heavy bass. I got close enough to hear a voice. A young male voice. Yeah, man, the voice said, followed by a chuckle. Easy money. The guy was crying like a baby on the news. It's hilarious. The laughter, the rage that exploded in my chest wasn't hot. It was ice cold. It froze my veins and sharpened my vision. The world slowed down. I wasn't Mason the grieving husband anymore. I was a weapon, and the safety was off. I stayed in the shadows, my breathing controlled, my heart rate forcefully slowed down by years of conditioning. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to shatter the driver's side window, drag the punk out by his throat, and squeeze until the laughter stopped forever. But I didn't. That was the difference between a brawler and a soldier. A brawler reacts. A soldier plans. If I killed him now, right here on this quiet suburban street, I would get one man. Just one. And the rest of the pack, the ones who held the knives, the ones who gave the orders, would scatter into the wind. I needed them all. I needed the root, not just a single branch. I pulled out my phone, shielding the screen's glow with my glove. I snapped 3 photos. One of the license plate, one of the driver's profile as he lit a cigarette, one of the unique, jagged dent on the rear bumper. The car, a rusted blue Honda, finally shifted into gear. I watched it roll away, the bass of the music fading into the distance. I didn't follow him. Not yet. I didn't need to chase him. I had his tag. I retreated back to my garage. The silence of the house hit me again, heavier this time. It felt like the house itself was mourning. I walked past the nursery door, the room we had painted a soft yellow. I kept the door closed. I couldn't look at the crib. Not tonight. The grief was still there, a massive, jagged stone sitting in my gut, but now it was wrapped in something else. Purpose. I sat at my workbench and booted up my laptop. I wasn't technically supposed to have access to certain databases anymore, but old passwords have a funny way of staying active if you know which backdoors to use. I ran the plate. J8K 449. It came back to a registered owner, Ryder Vance. I pulled up his file. 22 years old. A rap sheet that read like a cry for help that nobody answered. Petty theft, assault, possession. He wasn't a mastermind. He was a grunt, a foot soldier. He lived in a rundown apartment complex on the east side of the city, an area known as the Warrens. I spent the next 3 days becoming a ghost. I stopped answering my phone. I let the mail pile up. I told Felix the First was taking time off to go to a cabin in the woods to clear my head. He bought it. He told me to take all the time I needed. Take care of yourself, Mason, he had said, his voice full of brotherly concern. Don't let the darkness win. I hung up. I wasn't letting the darkness win. I was becoming the darkness. I swapped my truck for a beat-up sedan I bought for cash 2 towns over. I drove to the Warrens. I parked 3 blocks away from Ryder's apartment and just watched. Surveillance is 90% boredom and 10% adrenaline. You have to love the waiting. You have to find peace in the stillness. I learned Ryder's life in 48 hours. He woke up at noon. He ate fast food. He played video games. And at night, he met up with people. On the second night, I saw him meet a man in a black SUV. Ryder looked nervous. He was handing over an envelope. Cash, probably. The man in the SUV didn't get out. He just took the envelope and drove off. Ryder spat on the ground and walked back inside. That confirmed it. Ryder wasn't the boss. He was paying up. That meant there was a structure, a hierarchy. I started mapping it out on the wall of my garage. I didn't use red string like in the movies. I used grim efficiency. Photos, timelines, locations. Ryder was the entry point, but I couldn't just grab him. If I grabbed him, he might clam up. He might lawyer up. Or worse, he might not know anything valuable. I needed to break him first. I needed him terrified. I needed him to believe that something supernatural was coming for him. Fear makes people sloppy. Fear makes them talk. I waited until the 4th night. Ryder left his apartment at 8 p.m. to go to a dive bar called The Spigot. I didn't follow him to the bar. I went to his apartment. The lock on his front door was a joke. A standard pin tumbler I picked in under 10 seconds. I slipped inside. The place smelled of stale beer and unwashed laundry. It was filthy. Pizza boxes stacked in the corner, clothes everywhere. I didn't steal anything. That wasn't the mission. I moved through the small space, my boots silent on the linoleum. I went to his bedroom. I found a picture on his dresser. It was him and a girl, maybe a girlfriend or a sister. I took the photo out of the frame and placed it face down on the pillow. Then, I went to the kitchen. I opened his fridge. I took out a carton of milk and left it on the counter, uncapped. Small things. Things that make you question your sanity. I walked into the living room. On the coffee table, amidst the clutter, was a switchblade. I picked it up. It was cheap steel, but sharp. I remembered the coroner's report. 17 times. I took the knife. I walked over to the wall above his TV. With slow, deliberate strokes, I carved a single word into the drywall. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a curse. It was just a name. Ivy. I cleaned up the dust from the drywall, putting it in my pocket so the floor looked undisturbed. I placed the knife back on the table, exactly where it had been, but I rotated it so the blade was pointing toward the bedroom. I left the apartment just as quietly as I had entered. I went back to my car and waited. It was 2 a.m. when Ryder stumbled home. He was drunk, swaying as he walked up the external stairs. I watched through my binoculars. I saw the light flick on in his unit. I waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. Then, the light in the living room didn't just turn off, it stayed on. I saw his shadow pacing back and forth frantically. He had seen the wall. He had seen the name. He came to the window, pulling the blinds aside, looking out into the parking lot. He looked terrified. He was looking for a person, for a car, for anything. But he saw nothing. Just the empty, dark street. He didn't know who I was yet. He didn't know a Navy SEAL was sitting 300 yards away, watching his fear bloom like a dark flower. He just knew that the ghost of the woman he helped kill was in his house. And this was just the beginning. I wasn't going to let him sleep. Not tonight. Not ever again. Fear is a parasite. Once it burrows in, it feeds on everything. Your logic, your confidence, your ability to think straight. I watched Ryder Vance unravel for 3 days. I became the architect of his nightmares. He stopped going out. He kept the blinds drawn tight, day and night. When he did order food, he made the delivery guy leave it at the bottom of the stairs, refusing to open the door until the person was gone. He was isolating himself, which was exactly what I wanted. A lonely target is a weak target. On the 3rd night of his self-imposed lockdown, I decided it was time to escalate. The psychological pressure cooker was whistling. Now I needed to take the lid off. I waited until 3 a.m., the witching hour, the time when the human mind is most fragile. I parked my car a mile away and moved in on foot, dressed in black fatigues, a balaclava, and soft-soled tactical boots. The rain was falling again, a heavy, rhythmic drumming that masked the sound of my approach. I climbed the fire escape on the back of his building. The metal was slick and cold, but my grip was sure. I reached his window, the bedroom window. It was locked, of course, but Ryder had made a mistake. He'd used a simple latch lock, easily bypassed with a shim. I slid the window up. The sound of the rain covered the slight squeak of the frame. I stepped inside. The room smelled of sour sweat and fear. Ryder was asleep, but it was a restless, twitching sleep. He had a baseball bat leaning against the nightstand and a lamp left on in the corner, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. He was afraid of the dark now. Good. I moved to the side of the bed. I didn't wake him immediately. I just stood there, a shadow among shadows, watching the chest of the man who had laughed while my wife died. I looked at his hands, hands that had helped destroy my family. The rage flared up, hot and blinding, but I pushed it down into the pit of my stomach. Cold fury is sharper. I reached out and turned off the lamp. Click. The room plunged into darkness. Ryder stirred. He groaned, shifting in the sheets. "Who's there?" he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. I didn't answer. I just breathed. Slow, audible breaths. Ryder sat up, panic spiking in his movements. He fumbled for the bat, knocking a glass of water onto the floor. It shattered. I said, "Who's there?" "I've got a gun." He didn't have a gun. I knew he pawned it 2 days ago for cash. I switched on my tactical flashlight, aiming it directly into his eyes. The beam was blinding, disorienting. He threw his hands up, screaming. "Get up," I said. My voice was low, distorted by the balaclava, but clear. "Don't kill me. Take the money." "The money is in the kitchen," he blubbered, scrambling back against the headboard. I moved forward, grabbing him by the collar of his t-shirt. I hauled him out of bed and slammed him against the wall. He was light, wiry, nothing but nervous energy and bad choices. "I don't want your money, Ryder," I whispered, pressing the barrel of my suppressed pistol against his forehead. The cold metal made him freeze. He stopped struggling instantly. "I want a name." "I don't know what you're talking about," he cried, tears streaming down his face. Please, man, I didn't do nothing. Ivy, I said. The name hit him like a physical blow. His eyes went wide in the harsh light of the flashlight. He stopped breathing for a second. You laughed, I said. You stood outside. You heard her scream. And you laughed. No, I was just the lookout, he stammered, his bladder letting go. The smell of urine filled the small room. I didn't touch her. I swear. It was Dominic. Dominic and the others. I just drove the first car. Dominic. I memorized the name instantly. Dominic who? I pressed harder with the gun. Dominic. Dominic Russo. Please, he's crazy. He'll kill me if I talk. He's not here, I said, leaning in close so he could see the emptiness in my eyes through the mask. I am. And believe me, Ryder, compared to what I can do, Dominic is a saint. He was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. Where does he operate? The shipyard, Ryder gasped. Warehouse 4. They use it to strip cars. That's where they meet. Tonight. They're meeting tonight. I held him there for a moment longer, letting the terror sink into his bones. I had what I needed. A name. A location. A timeline. If you move, I said. If you call anyone. If you even think about running. I will find you. And next time, we won't be talking. I pistol whipped him. A short, controlled strike to the temple. He crumpled to the floor, unconscious but alive. I stood over him for a second. It would be so easy to end him. To put a bullet in his brain and wash one stain off the earth. But Ryder was a pawn. A nothing. Killing him would alert the others too soon. Leaving him alive, terrified and confused, was better. He wouldn't call Dominic. He was too scared that Dominic would kill him for snitching. He would run. He would disappear. And that suited me fine. I slipped back out into the rain. The night air felt cleaner now. I had a direction. Warehouse 4. The shipyard. I drove back to my staging area, a storage unit I had rented under a fake name near the docks. I swapped my gear. The suppressed pistol was good for close quarters, but if I was walking into a warehouse, I needed options. I loaded magazines for my carbine. I checked my flashbangs. I sharpened my combat knife. I wasn't going to storm the place like Rambo. That was a good way to get shot. I was going to do what I was trained to do, reconnaissance, infiltration, surgical strikes. I arrived at the shipyard an hour later. It was a desolate place, a graveyard of rusted shipping containers and rotting piers. The fog rolled in off the water, thick and gray. Perfect cover. I located Warehouse 4. It was a massive corrugated metal structure. Lights spilled out from the cracks in the blackened windows. I could hear music. Voices. I moved to the roof of an adjacent building, setting up my spotting scope. Through the dirty glass of the warehouse skylight, I saw them. There were 5 of them, sitting around a poker table, crates of stolen electronics stacked high around them. And in the center, a man who looked like he owned the world. He was big, covered in tattoos, laughing loudly as he raked in a pot of chips. Dominic Russo. He looked comfortable. He looked safe. He had no idea that his world was about to catch fire. But then I saw someone else. A man walked into the frame, handing Dominic a drink. I zoomed in. I recognized him from the photos I took that first night. The driver of the getaway car. Julian. My target list was growing. I wasn't going to engage them all tonight. That would be suicide. But I needed to isolate them. I needed to peel them away one by one, like layers of an onion, until only Dominic was left in the center, crying for mercy. I packed up my scope. I had seen enough. Tonight, I would send a message. I climbed down and moved toward the power junction box on the side of the warehouse. I pulled out a pair of wire cutters. Snap! The lights inside the warehouse died instantly. The music cut out. I heard shouting. What the hell? Check the breaker. The side door opened. A figure stepped out into the fog, flashlights sweeping the darkness. It was Julian. Perfect. I smiled in the dark. The hunt was on. The fog at the shipyard was thick, swirling around the metal containers like ghosts trying to find a way home. Julian stepped out of the warehouse door, his flashlight beam cutting a weak, milky path through the mist. He looked annoyed, not scared. That was his mistake. He thought this was a power outage, a blown fuse. He didn't know he was stepping into a kill zone. Damn piece of junk wiring, he muttered, kicking a loose stone. He walked toward the breaker box on the side of the building, his heavy boots crunching on the gravel. I was 20 feet away, pressed flat against the side of a rusting shipping container. I was completely motionless. My breathing was shallow, barely moving my chest. In the teams, they taught us that stillness is a weapon. Most people look for movement. They don't look for shadows that are slightly darker than they should be. Julian reached the breaker box. He fiddled with the latch, cursing under his breath. Dominic's gonna have my head if the game's ruined, he said to himself. He flipped the switch. Nothing happened. I had cut the main line, not just tripped a breaker. What the? He tapped his flashlight against the metal box. I moved. It wasn't a run, it was a glide. Fast, silent, lethal. I covered the 20 feet before he could turn around. I grabbed him from behind, one hand clamping over his mouth, the other locking around his throat in a sleeper hold. He thrashed. He was strong, panicked, clawing at my arm with desperate fingers. He tried to reach for the gun tucked in his waistband, but I slammed him hard against the container, knocking the wind out of him. I tightened my grip. The blood flow to his brain cut off. His struggles weakened. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. He went limp. I didn't kill him. Not yet. I dragged his unconscious body into the darkness, away from the warehouse, toward the edge of the pier where the water lapped black and oily against the pilings. I zip-tied his hands and feet. I took his gun, a heavy revolver, and tossed it into the bay. Then, I slapped him awake. Julian gasped, his eyes snapping open. He tried to move, but the plastic ties bit into his wrists. He looked up and saw me standing over him, silhouetted against the faint city glow. I was wearing my mask. Don't scream, I said calmly, or you go in the water. Who are you? He wheezed, terror replacing the annoyance in his voice. The cops. You a cop. Cops read you your rights, Julian. I'm not reading you anything. I crouched down, eye level with him. Ryder sent his regards. Ryder? Julian's eyes widened. That little rat snitched. I'll kill him. You're not killing anyone. You're answering questions. I pulled out a photo, a picture of Ivy. I held it up to his face. Do you remember her? He stared at the photo. Recognition flickered in his eyes, followed immediately by guilt. He looked away. I don't know her. Liar. I grabbed his collar and dragged him closer to the edge of the pier. His boots dangled over the black water. The night of the storm. The house on Elm Street. You drove the car. You waited while your friends went inside. I just drove, he cried, his voice pitching up. I stayed in the car. I didn't touch her. It was Dominic and Grant. Grant did the stabbing. Grant. Another name. Another target. Where is Grant? I asked. I don't know. He moves around. I pushed him further over the edge. He screamed, a short, strangled sound. He's at the auto shop. Julian shrieked. Grant works at the body shop on 5th. He scraps the cars. Please, man, pull me up. I pulled him back onto the solid wood of the pier. He lay there, hyperventilating, sobbing. He was broken. The money, I said. Ryder said you guys got paid. But it wasn't a robbery. Who paid you? Julian shook his head frantically. I don't know. Dominic handles the money. He just gives us our cut. He said it was a special job. A cleanup. That's all I know. A cleanup. That term made my blood run cold. You clean up a mess. You don't clean up a pregnant woman unless someone specifically wants her gone. This wasn't random violence. This was a hit. You're going to do something for me, Julian, I said, standing up. You're going to send a text to Dominic. Right now. I pulled his phone from his pocket and unlocked it using his Face ID. I held it out to him. Type this. Cops are swarming the perimeter. I'm ditching the phone. Lay low. Julian's hands shook as he typed the message. He hit send. Good, I said. Now they're paranoid. Now they're looking over their shoulders. Can I go? Julian begged. I won't tell anyone. I swear. I looked at him. I thought about the fear Ivy must have felt. I thought about the laughter. You're leaving town, Julian, I said. Tonight. If I ever see your face in this city again, if I ever catch a whiff of you, the water won't be a threat. It'll be your grave. I cut the ties on his feet, but left his hands bound. Run. He scrambled up and ran into the darkness, stumbling, falling, getting up again. He was gone. He was out of the game. He would spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder, wondering if the shadow in the corner was me. I threw his phone into the bay. I walked back to my car. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a dull ache in my muscles. I had caused chaos. Dominic would get that text and panic. He would think the police were closing in. He would make mistakes. He would move. And I would be watching. But first, I had a new stop. The body shop on 5th, Grant. The one who held the knife. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. Julian was just a driver. Ryder was just a lookout. But Grant. Grant had blood on his hands. My wife's blood. This wouldn't be an interrogation. This wouldn't be a warning. I drove toward 5th Avenue. The city lights blurred past me, streaks of neon in the rainy night. I checked the clock on the dashboard. 4:15 a.m. The city was asleep, but the monsters were awake, and the hunter was coming for them. I pulled into an alleyway across from the body shop. It was a grimy, grease-stained building with a chain-link fence. A single light bulb buzzed over the side door. I reached into the back seat and pulled out my bag. I didn't take the non-lethal gear this time. I took the tactical tomahawk. I took the heavy zip ties. I wasn't looking for answers from Grant. I was looking for justice. The body shop on 5th Avenue was quiet, a metal tomb surrounded by the skeletons of stripped cars. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the air was heavy with the smell of oil and stale exhaust. Inside, a faint light flickered. Someone was working late. Or maybe they were just hiding. Grant, the man Julian said had held the knife. I didn't rush. Rushing gets you killed. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, just watching the patterns. No guards outside. No cameras on the perimeter fence. Just cheap, rusted chain link. They felt safe here. This was their territory. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Felix. Checking in on you, brother. Hope the cabin is helping. Let me know if you need supplies brought up. I felt a pang of guilt. Felix was a good man. He was trying to look out for me while I was down here in the mud, hunting animals. I typed a quick reply. All good. Just fishing. Peaceful. I put the phone away. Fishing. Yeah, I was fishing. Just not for trout. I exited the car, moving like smoke through the alley. I bypassed the main gate, too noisy. I found a section of the fence where the chain link had been pulled away from the post. I squeezed through, scraping my shoulder on the metal but making no sound. I approached the side door of the shop. It was locked, but the window next to it was cracked open a few inches for ventilation. I peered inside. The shop floor was cluttered with car parts. Sparks flew from a welding torch in the center of the bay. A man was working on a sedan, his face hidden behind a welding mask. He was big, bulky. He moved with a heavy, aggressive energy. I scanned the rest of the room. Empty. Just him. I tested the door handle. Locked. I took a small pry bar from my belt, wedged it into the frame, and applied slow, steady pressure. The wood groaned. Then the latch popped with a soft click that was masked by the hiss of the welding torch. I slipped inside. The smell of burning metal was acrid. I moved behind a stack of tires, inching closer to the welder. I needed to be sure. I couldn't just attack a random mechanic. The man turned off the torch and flipped up his mask. I saw his face. Thick neck, a scar running down his cheek, dead eyes. It matched the police mugshot I had pulled from the gang database earlier. Grant. He walked over to a workbench, grabbed a beer, and took a long swig. Then he picked up his phone. He looked agitated. Dominic, pick up, he growled into the phone. Julian sent that text about the cops, but I don't see anything here. Is it real? Should I torch the place? He paced back and forth. Fine. Screw you. I'm packing up. He started shoving tools into a bag. He was panicked. My psychological warfare was working. Julian's text had spooked them all. I stepped out from behind the tires. I didn't have a gun in my hand. I held the tactical tomahawk. Going somewhere? I asked. Grant spun around, dropping the wrench he was holding. His eyes went wide. Who the hell are you? I'm the husband, I said. He froze. He knew exactly who I was. His hand drifted toward a drawer in the workbench. Don't, I warned. He didn't listen. He lunged for the drawer. I threw the tomahawk. I didn't aim for his head. I wasn't trying to kill him instantly. I aimed for his shoulder. The blade spun through the air and buried itself in the meat of his right deltoid. Grant screamed, a high-pitched wail of agony, and collapsed against the workbench, clutching his arm. The gun he was reaching for clattered to the floor. I walked over calmly, kicked the gun away, and yanked the tomahawk free. He screamed again, falling to his knees, blood soaking his greasy work shirt. That's for the first stab, I said, standing over him. 16 to go. Please, he gasped, his face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. I was just following orders. Dominic made me do it. Dominic didn't hold the knife, I said, my voice void of emotion. You did. Julian told me. You enjoyed it. No, I didn't. It was a job. Just a job. A job. I crouched down, grabbing him by his hair and forcing him to look at me. Who hired you? Who pays for a hit on a pregnant woman? I don't know, he sobbed. I swear. Only Dominic knows the money man. We just get the cash in envelopes. It's big money, man. High-level stuff. How do you contact the money man? I don't. Dominic has a burner phone. He keeps it in his safe at the club. The Blue Velvet. That's where he is right now. He's meeting someone. The Blue Velvet. Dominic's club. The headquarters. Is he meeting the money man? I asked. Maybe. I don't know. He said he had to clear things up because of the heat. Please. I'm bleeding out. I looked at the wound. It was deep, but not fatal if treated. I stood up. You're right, I said. You are bleeding out. I grabbed a roll of duct tape from the workbench. I tossed it to him. Wrap it tight. Then call the police. Turn yourself in. Confess to everything. The stabbings. The gang. All of it. What? He looked confused, terrified. If you don't, I said, leaning in, I'll come back. And next time, I won't aim for the shoulder. I turned and walked away. Wait, he yelled. You're just leaving me? I have a bigger fish to catch, I said without looking back. I walked out into the cool night air. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clear. Grant was done. He was broken, bleeding, and terrified. He would call the cops because prison was safer than being out here with me. I had the location, the Blue Velvet, and I had a target, the safe with the burner phone. But something Grant said stuck in my head. High-level stuff. Why would a high-level client hire a street gang like the West Side Kings for a hit? It was messy. It was loud. Professionals use professionals. You don't hire thugs to kill a woman unless you want it to look like a robbery, unless you want it to look random. Someone wanted Ivy dead, but they wanted it to look like bad luck. I got back in my car. The pieces were starting to form a picture, but the picture was ugly. I drove toward the neon glow of the downtown district. The Blue Velvet was a strip club on the edge of the red light district. Dominic's fortress. I wasn't going to sneak in this time. I was going to walk in the front door. I needed to see Dominic face to face. I needed to see the fear in his eyes when he realized his empire was crumbling. But as I drove, a thought nagged at me. Julian, Grant, Ryder, they were all scared. But they were scared of Dominic. Who was Dominic scared of? I was about to find out. The Blue Velvet wasn't just a club. It was a fortress masked in neon and cheap perfume. I parked 2 blocks away, checking my gear. I swapped the tomahawk for a concealed pistol, a compact 9mm tucked into my waistband, and a small, high-tech signal jammer. I wasn't going in to start a war. Not yet. I was going in to get the truth. The bouncers at the door were huge, slab-faced men who looked like they chewed rocks for breakfast. But I wasn't wearing my tactical gear. I was wearing a suit I'd kept in the trunk. I looked like a customer, a depressed, wealthy man looking to drown his sorrows. I paid the cover charge without a word and walked in. The music was deafening, heavy bass that vibrated in my chest. The lights were low, flashing red and purple. Dancers moved on stage, but I didn't look at them. My eyes scanned the room. There, in the VIP section, elevated above the main floor. A glass-walled booth. Dominic Russo sat there like a king. He was arguing with someone, a man in a sharp gray suit who looked out of place among the leather jackets and tattoos. The man looked nervous. Dominic looked furious. I needed to get closer. I moved through the crowd, dodging waitresses and drunk patrons. I found a spot near the stairs leading up to the VIP area. I activated the signal jammer in my pocket. It would kill the cell service in a 50-foot radius. No calls in, no calls out. Dominic pulled out his phone. He stared at it, tapping the screen angrily. No signal. He slammed it down on the table. The man in the gray suit stood up, gesturing wildly. He was leaving. This was my chance. I couldn't get to Dominic inside the glass booth without a fight, but I could get to the suit. I waited. The man in the gray suit hurried down the stairs, looking over his shoulder. He was sweating. He pushed past me, heading for the rear exit. I followed. He burst out into the alleyway behind the club, fumbling for his car keys. The alley was dark, smelling of garbage and rain. Damn it! Damn it! He muttered, dropping his keys. I stepped out, closing the heavy metal door behind me. The noise of the club muffled instantly. Rough night? I asked. The man jumped, spinning around. Who are you? Back off, man. I'm not in the mood. You look like you're in trouble, I said, walking closer. Dominic doesn't seem happy with you. You know Dominic? The man's eyes narrowed. Are you with him? Look, tell him the transfer is coming. I just need time. Transfer. Money. I'm not with Dominic, I said, stepping into the light of the street lamp. I'm the reason the transfer is late. I grabbed him. He was soft, weak. I slammed him against his car, pinning his arm behind his back. Who are you paying? I hissed. Why is a suit like you paying a gang leader? It's not what you think, he squealed. I'm just the accountant. I just move the funds. Whose funds? I can't. He'll kill me. I pressed the barrel of my gun into his kidney. He might kill you later. I will kill you right now. He broke. It's an offshore account. Cayman Islands. The account name is Cerberus. Who owns it? I don't know the name. I just have the routing number. But the payments, they started 6 months ago. Before the hit. It was a retainer. A retainer. Someone had put the gang on a payroll months before Ivy was killed. This was premeditated long-term. Show me, I ordered. Open your phone. Show me the transfer logs. He fumbled with his phone. His hands were shaking so bad, he dropped it once. He pulled up a banking app, a secure, encrypted platform. He showed me the log. Outgoing, $50,000. Recipient, D. Russo. Source, Cerberus LLC. I memorized the routing number. But then, I saw something else. In the notes section of the transfer, there was a reference code. Project Vestige. Vestige. The world stopped. The alley, the rain, the man whimpering against the car, it all vanished. Vestige was the name of the private security firm I started with Felix. It was our company code for the retirement plan. The buyout. The money we set aside for when we wanted out of the mercenary life. My stomach dropped. The air left my lungs. Who authorized this? I roared, spinning the man around and slamming him against the hood. Who has access to the Vestige accounts? Only 2 people, the accountant cried. The partners, Mason and Felix. I let him go. I stumbled back. Felix, my best friend, my brother in arms, the man who stood next to me at my wedding, the man who held my shoulder at the funeral and told me to take all the time I needed. It wasn't a robbery. It wasn't a random gang initiation. It was a business move. Felix wanted full control of the company. He knew I was planning to retire when the baby came. He knew I wanted to cash out my shares, millions of dollars. If I retired, the company would lose its biggest asset. But if I was broken, if my family was gone, I would either leave town or get myself killed looking for revenge. Either way, Felix got the company. And he got the money. He hired Dominic to do the dirty work. He paid for the knives. He paid for the laughter. I leaned against the brick wall, feeling like I was going to vomit. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. The man I trusted with my life had paid for the death of my wife and unborn son. Get out of here, I whispered to the accountant. He didn't wait. He scrambled into his car and peeled out of the alley. I stood alone in the rain. The grief was gone. The sadness was gone. All that was left was a cold, black void. I pulled out my phone. I had a text from Felix, sent 10 minutes ago. Hey brother, just checking in. Let me know if you catch anything up at the cabin. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I typed, almost there. It's going to be a long night. I sent it. I wasn't hunting a gang anymore. I wasn't hunting strangers. I was hunting my brother. And unlike the gang, Felix knew how I thought. He knew my tactics. He knew my moves. This wasn't just a hunt. This was a war between two soldiers who knew each other's souls. And only one of us was walking away. The drive back to my safe house was a blur. I didn't see the road. I saw memories. I saw Felix toasting at my wedding, his smile wide and genuine. I saw him helping me paint the nursery, laughing as he got yellow paint on his expensive watch. I saw him handing me a beer after a firefight in Kabul, his hands shaking just as much as mine. All lies. Every smile, every handshake, every brother. It was all a mask. Underneath, he was calculating the cost of my life against his profit margins. He didn't just kill Ivy. He erased my future to secure his own. I reached the storage unit I was using as a base. I slammed the door shut and locked it, leaning my forehead against the cold metal. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash everything in the room. But I didn't. I couldn't afford to be emotional. Felix was smart. If he sensed even a tremor in my voice, if he suspected I knew, he would vanish. Or worse, he would send a professional hit team to finish what the gang started. I needed to be colder than him. I walked over to my wall of evidence. I looked at the photos of Ryder, Julian, Grant, and Dominic. They were just tools. Blunt instruments used by a surgeon. I took a red marker and drew a line from Dominic's picture to a new index card I taped at the very top. I wrote one name, Felix. I sat down at my laptop. I needed proof. Hard, undeniable proof. The accountant's word wouldn't hold up. Felix would have him killed or paid off before sunrise. I needed the digital trail. I logged into the Vestige secure server. My access was still active, but Felix would have flags set up. If I accessed the financial records directly, he'd get an alert. I had to be subtle. I routed my connection through 3 proxy servers in Eastern Europe. I accessed the project, Vestige folder, the one the accountant mentioned. It was password protected with a biometric key. I couldn't open it, but I could see the metadata. I could see the file size changes. The file had been modified on the exact dates of the attacks. A withdrawal the day before Ivy died. Another withdrawal the day after the funeral, the bonus for a job well done. And then I found the emails. Not on the company server, but in the backups of the internal chat logs. Felix was sloppy. He thought deleting the emails was enough, but he forgot the auto-archive feature we installed years ago for compliance. I searched for keywords. Russo. Clean. Problem. One hit came up. An encrypted message from Felix to an unknown number, dated 2 months ago. The anchor is too heavy. He won't sail unless the anchor is cut. Handle it. The anchor. That's what he called Ivy. My wife. My life. She was just an anchor holding me back from making him money. I printed the logs. My hands were steady now. The shock had been replaced by a grim clarity. I picked up my phone. I needed to isolate Felix. I needed to strip away his protection. He was using Dominic and the gang as a buffer. As long as Dominic was alive, Felix felt safe. He thought the gang was taking the heat. It was time to change the narrative. I texted the number I had taken from Julian's phone, Dominic's burner. I know about Felix. I know about the money. He's selling you out to clean his tracks. Police raid in 24 hours. He gave them your location. I didn't wait for a reply. I knew Dominic. He was paranoid. If he thought his rich backer was turning on him, he would panic. He would lash out. Then, I texted Felix. Found something strange in the old case files. Need to talk. Meet me at the shipyard tomorrow night. Alone. I was setting the board. I was bringing the king and the pawn to the same square. I spent the rest of the night prepping. I cleaned my weapons. I checked my armor. I sharpened my knife until it could split a hair. This wasn't going to be a simple arrest. This was going to be an execution of justice. But I had one more stop to make before the sun came up. I drove to Felix's house, a massive, modern mansion on the cliffs overlooking the ocean. I parked a mile down the road and hiked through the woods. I didn't go inside. I set up a camera in the trees, pointed directly at his living room window. I linked the feed to my phone. I watched him. He was pacing in his living room, a drink in his hand. He looked stressed. He checked his phone constantly. He had received my text. He was debating what to do. He made a call. I couldn't hear the audio, but I could see his body language. He was angry. He was shouting. He hung up and threw the glass into the fireplace. He was rattling. Good. I walked back to my car as the sun began to crest over the horizon, painting the sky in blood-orange hues. It was the start of a new day, the last day for the West Side Kings, and the last day for the man I used to call brother. I drove to the shipyard. I needed to prepare the battlefield. I wasn't just walking into a trap, I was building one. I spent hours rigging the warehouse. Motion sensors, remote detonated flashbangs, caches of ammo hidden in the shadows. I knew Felix would come. He had to. He couldn't risk me finding out the truth. He would come to talk, but he would bring a gun. He would try to silence me the way he silenced Ivy. But he was forgetting one thing. He trained me. He taught me everything I knew. But I had learned a few things in the dark that he never knew. I sat on a crate in the middle of the empty warehouse, the ghost of yesterday's violence still hanging in the air. I waited. Tonight, the family reunion would end in blood. The waiting is the hardest part. In the field, we call it the soak. You soak in the environment, the temperature, the angles, until you become part of the landscape. I sat in the rafters of Warehouse 4, 30 feet above the concrete floor, watching the dust motes dance in the shafts of dying sunlight. I had sent the texts. Now I had to watch the rats scurry. I checked the camera feed I had planted outside Felix's house. He had left an hour ago. He was in his sleek black SUV, heading this way. But he wasn't coming alone. I saw him stop at a discreet location downtown, a private security firm he used for off-book jobs. He picked up 2 men, professionals, ex-military like us. So, he wasn't coming to talk. He was coming to clean up the last loose end. Me. But Felix wasn't the only one moving. Dominic was moving too. My text to Dominic had done its job. The gang leader was terrified that his high-level backer was selling him out to the police. Dominic wasn't going to go down quietly. He was bringing his entire crew, what was left of them, to the shipyard to confront Felix, demand his money, and disappear. I had orchestrated a collision course. 2 trains on the same track, and I was the one controlling the switch. At 8 p.m., the first vehicle arrived. It was Dominic. A convoy of 3 battered vans screeched into the shipyard lot. 12 men spilled out. They looked nervous, aggressive. They were armed with bats, chains, and cheap handguns. Dominic was barking orders, his face red with rage. "Spread out," he yelled, his voice echoing off the metal containers. "When he gets here, we surround him. I want my money, and then we clip him." I watched from above, silent as a gargoyle. Dominic positioned his men in the shadows around the main entrance of the warehouse. They were setting an ambush for Felix. Perfect. 10 minutes later, Felix arrived. His SUV rolled in slowly, headlights cutting through the gloom. It stopped 20 yards from the warehouse doors. The engine cut. Felix stepped out. He looked immaculate in a tailored suit, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. His 2 hired guns stepped out behind him, big men, disciplined, scanning the perimeter with professional eyes. They had submachine guns tucked under their jackets. "Mason," Felix called out, his voice smooth, projecting confidence he didn't feel. I'm here. Come out, brother. Let's talk. He was talking to me, but he was walking into Dominic's trap. I didn't answer. I didn't move. Dominic lost his patience. Talk is over, Dominic screamed, stepping out from behind a stack of crates. His men swarmed out of the shadows, surrounding the SUV. 12 angry thugs against 3 professionals. Felix didn't flinch. He just looked annoyed. Who is this? He asked, looking around. Mason? Is this your doing? I want my money, you suit-wearing snake. Dominic shouted, waving a pistol. You think you can sell us to the cops? We did your dirty work. We killed the girl. Now pay up. Felix's face went pale. Not because of the gun, but because Dominic had just said it out loud. He had admitted it. You idiot, Felix hissed. Shut your mouth. Pay me. Dominic fired a warning shot into the ground near Felix's feet. That was the catalyst. Felix's bodyguards didn't hesitate. They moved with terrifying speed. One of them raised his MP5 and fired a controlled burst. Pop, pop, pop. 3 of Dominic's men dropped instantly. Chaos erupted. The gang members, untrained and panicked, started firing wildly. Bullets sparked off the SUV and whizzed through the air. Felix dove behind the car door for cover. His bodyguards returned fire with surgical precision, dropping targets with every pull of the trigger. It was a massacre. The gang had numbers, but Felix's men had training. I watched it all from the rafters. I didn't fire a single shot. I let them destroy each other. I let the men who killed my wife bleed out on the cold concrete. I let Felix waste his ammo on street thugs. Dominic was screaming, firing blindly as he retreated into the warehouse. Kill them. Kill them all. The firefight moved inside. This was my domain. I had rigged the lights earlier. I hit the remote in my pocket. Click. The warehouse plunged into total darkness. The shooting stopped for a second, replaced by confused shouting. Get the lights. Felix yelled from the doorway. Flashlights. Clear the corners. Beams of light cut through the dust. Felix's men were sweeping the room, hunting Dominic. I lowered my night vision goggles. The world turned green and sharp. It was time to join the game. I dropped from the rafters, landing silently on top of a shipping container. I was behind Felix's rear guard. I didn't use a gun. I slipped down behind the mercenary. He was focused on the darkness ahead. He never heard me. I wrapped my arm around his neck and pulled him back into the shadows. A quick, sharp twist. He went limp. I laid him down gently. One down. I moved to the next container. The second bodyguard was moving toward Dominic's hiding spot. I threw a loose bolt across the room. It clattered loudly against a metal wall. The bodyguard spun around, firing a burst at the noise. Contact right, he shouted. While he was distracted, I moved. I came up on his blind side. A tactical baton strike to the knee, shattering the joint, followed by a strike to the temple. He went down hard. 2 down. Now it was just Felix, Dominic, and the remaining terrified gang members. I picked up the bodyguard's radio. I knew Felix was listening on the same frequency. Felix, I whispered into the mic. I heard him gasp. Mason, where are you? Help me. These animals are crazy. I'm not here to help you, Felix, I said, my voice calm and cold in his ear. I'm here to watch you die. What? Mason, listen to me. It's a misunderstanding. I saw the bank transfers, Felix. Project Vestige. You killed her for money. Silence. Then, a low chuckle. A dark, twisted sound. She was in the way. Mason, Felix said, his voice changing. The mask was off. You were going to leave. You were going to ruin everything we built for some suburban fantasy. I did what I had to do for the company. And now, I said, I'm going to do what I have to do for the company. I pulled the pin on a flashbang and dropped it into the center of the floor. Boom. The blinding light and deafening concussive blast filled the warehouse. Screams erupted. I jumped down to the floor. The hunt was over. The slaughter was about to begin. The ringing in the ears after a flashbang lasts about 5 seconds for the uninitiated. For trained operators, it's less, but it's still disorienting. For the West Side Kings, it was the end of the world. I moved through the smoke like a phantom. My night vision goggles cut through the haze, turning the chaotic scene into a clear, green-tinted killing field. Dominic was stumbling near a stack of pallets, rubbing his eyes, swinging his gun wildly. "I can't see. I can't see," he screamed. I walked up to him. I didn't run. I didn't need to. I kicked the gun out of his hand. I heard the bones in his fingers snap. He howled. I grabbed him by the throat and slammed him against the forklift. "Where is he?" I whispered. "Who?" He gurgled, clawing at my hand. "Felix." "Where did he go?" "He ran. The back office." He ran to the office. I let Dominic go. He slid to the floor, sobbing. He wasn't a king anymore. He was just a scared kid in a man's body. I could have ended him right there. A quick snap of the neck. But death was too easy. I had a better plan for Dominic. I zip-tied him to the forklift. "Don't go anywhere," I said. I moved toward the back office. It was a raised platform with glass windows overlooking the warehouse floor, the foreman's office. The door was closed. I approached slowly. I could see movement inside. Felix was in there. He was trapped. I didn't kick the door down. I stood to the side of the frame. "Felix," I called out. "There's nowhere to go. The exits are rigged. The police are 5 minutes out. Dominic's men are down. It's just us. You think you can take me, Mason?" Felix's voice came through the thin walls. He sounded breathless, manic. "I taught you. I know every move you have. You taught me how to fight," I said. "You didn't teach me how to hate. I learned that on my own." A gunshot blasted through the door, splintering the wood right where my chest would have been if I was an amateur. I waited. "Come on," he screamed. "Come and get me." I pulled a small canister from my belt. CS gas. Tear gas. I pulled the pin and tossed it through the bullet hole in the door. Hiss. "No. No." I heard him coughing, gagging. The sound of furniture crashing. He kicked the door open, stumbling out onto the catwalk, tears streaming down his face, gun raised blindly. I was waiting. I disarmed him with a swift, brutal strike to the wrist. His gun skittered across the metal grating and fell to the concrete floor below. I swept his legs. He hit the deck hard. Before he could recover, I was on top of him, my knee pressed into his chest, my combat knife resting against his jugular. He froze. He looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen, filled with terror. "Mason, please," he wheezed. "We're brothers. Think about the company. We can fix this. I have money. Millions. It's yours. All of it." "You think this is about money?" I asked, leaning in close. "You think you can buy my wife back? You think you can buy my son?" "It was business," he cried. "It was just business." "No," I said. "It was personal." I raised the knife. Felix flinched, closing his eyes, waiting for the end. But I didn't bring it down. I stood up. I stepped back. Felix opened his eyes, confused. He scrambled backward, trying to get away. What are you doing?" "I'm not going to kill you, Felix," I said. He started to laugh. A nervous, incredulous laugh. You can't do it. You're soft, Mason. That's always been your problem. You're too soft." "I'm not killing you," I repeated, holstering my knife. "Because death is an escape, and you don't get to escape." I pulled out my phone. I hit a button. Sirens. Not in the distance. Close. Right outside. "I didn't call the police 5 minutes ago," I said. "I called them 30 minutes ago. I told them there was a gang war in progress. I told them the leader of the West Side Kings was meeting his supplier." Felix's face went white. "You set me up. Look around, Felix," I said, gesturing to the carnage below. "Dead gang members. Your bodyguard's dead. Dominic tied up and ready to sing like a bird to cut a plea deal. And you're here in the middle of it all, with the murder weapon that killed Ivy in your car." "What?" Felix scrambled to the railing. "I planted it," I said. "While you were busy shooting at Dominic, I put the knife, the one Grant used, under your driver's seat. It has your prints on it. I made sure of that when we had beers last week." You touched my knife sharpener. Remember? Felix looked at me with pure horror. He realized the trap wasn't physical. It was legal. It was reputational. It was total destruction. You're going to prison, Felix, I said. Not for white-collar fraud. Not for embezzlement. You're going to prison for mass murder. For leading a gang. For killing a pregnant woman. You'll be in general population. And everyone in there will know what you did. The sirens were deafening now. Red and blue lights flashed through the high windows. Run, Felix whispered. You have to run too. I'm already gone, I said. I moved to the back of the catwalk. There was a service ladder leading to the roof. Mason! Felix screamed as the police burst through the main doors. Mason, don't leave me. Freeze. Police. Drop to the ground. I climbed the ladder. I reached the roof just as I heard the cuffs clicking onto Felix's wrists. I heard him shouting, blaming everyone but himself. I heard Dominic yelling, cutting a deal before he even got in the car. I stood on the roof, the cold wind hitting my face. I looked down at the city. It looked different now. The rot was exposed, but the surgery was done. I walked to the edge of the roof and looked at the bay. The water was black and endless. I took off my tactical vest. I took off my gloves. I dropped them into a vent shaft. I wasn't Mason the Navy SEAL anymore. I wasn't Mason the husband. I was just a ghost. But I wasn't finished. There was one last thing to do. One last visit. I climbed down the fire escape on the far side of the building, slipping into the night just as the news helicopters started to circle. Felix was going to hell, but I had to go say goodbye to an angel. Wait, hold on. I paused on the fire escape, my hand gripping the cold iron railing. I looked back at the warehouse. The police were swarming the entrance, dragging Felix and Dominic out in cuffs. The plan had worked perfectly. The legal trap was sprung. But as I watched Felix being shoved into the back of a squad car, something in my chest tightened. A hard, cold knot that refused to loosen. He looked relieved. Even in handcuffs, even facing life in prison, there was a flicker of calculation in his eyes. I knew Felix. He had money stashed offshore. He had lawyers who could twist reality until it broke. He had connections. He would drag the trial out for years. He might even get off on a technicality. Or worse, he'd run his empire from a cell, living like a king on the inside while Ivy lay in the cold ground. No, the realization hit me like a physical blow. The legal system was a game, and Felix knew how to play it better than anyone. Prison wasn't justice. Prison was just a timeout for men like him. My quiet revenge suddenly felt naive. It felt weak. I remembered the laughter. I remembered the 17 stab wounds. I remembered the baby crib that would never be used. I stopped climbing down. I started climbing back up. I wasn't done. The police were securing the perimeter, but they hadn't cleared the roof. They assumed the threat was contained on the ground floor. I reached into my boot and pulled out my backup weapon, a combat knife with a serrated edge. The same kind of knife Felix had paid Grant to use on Ivy. I moved across the rooftop, silent as a shadow, tracking the movement of the officers below through the skylights. They were distracted, processing the scene, taking statements. I needed to get to the squad car. I dropped down onto the loading dock roof on the far side of the building, bypassing the police cordon. I moved through the shadows of the parked semi-trucks. The rain had started again, heavier this time, masking my footsteps. I saw the patrol car where they had put Felix. It was parked away from the main cluster, near the exit gate. The officer who drove it had stepped out to talk to a detective. Felix was alone in the back seat, separated by the wire mesh. I crept up behind the car. I could see Felix through the rain-streaked window. He was leaning back, eyes closed, probably already planning his defense strategy, probably thinking about who he could bribe. I tried the back door handle. Locked. I didn't panic. I used a window punch, a small, spring-loaded tool. I pressed it against the rear corner of the glass. Pop. The safety glass shattered into thousands of tiny cubes, crumbling silently into the seat. Felix jumped, spinning around. What the? He saw me. His eyes went wide. The arrogance vanished, replaced by pure, primal terror. He opened his mouth to scream for the cops. I reached in through the broken window. My hand clamped over his mouth before he could make a sound. I pulled him close to the wire mesh, pressing his face against the steel. I changed my mind, I whispered. He struggled, thrashing against the seat, his handcuffed hands useless. He looked at me, pleading with his eyes. He was begging. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel joy. I felt nothing but the cold, hard necessity of the act. Like removing a tumor. 17, I whispered. I didn't give him 17. I gave him one. One precise, deep cut to the carotid artery. I held him there for a moment, watching the life drain out of his eyes, watching the light fade until there was nothing left but a shell. The man who ordered the death of my family was gone. There would be no trial, no lawyers, no appeals, no parole, just silence. I released him. He slumped back against the seat, still. I wiped the knife on the fabric of the seat cover and dropped it onto the floorboard. I wanted them to find it. I wanted them to know it wasn't a gang hit. It wasn't random. It was a soldier clearing the battlefield. I slipped back into the shadows just as the officer started walking back toward the car. Hey, what happened to the window? I heard the officer shout. Then, a second later, we need a medic. Suspect is down. Suspect is down. Chaos erupted again. Sirens wailed. Flashlights swept the area. But I was already gone. I melted into the darkness of the shipyard, moving through the maze of containers, invisible and untraceable. I reached the water's edge. I had a small inflatable Zodiac boat stashed under the pier for extraction. I cut the line and pushed off, the electric motor humming silently as I glided out into the bay. I looked back at the shore. The shipyard was a spectacle of flashing lights, a chaotic light show against the dark sky. I felt light. The weight that had been crushing my chest for months was gone. The monster was dead. The laughter had stopped. I steered the boat toward the open ocean. I wasn't going back to my life. Mason the husband died in that house with Ivy. Mason the soldier died on that rooftop. I was something else now. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the only thing I had kept. Ivy's wedding ring. I had found it in a pawn shop 3 days ago, tracked down using the receipt I beat out of Ryder. I held it up to the moonlight. It sparkled, cold and beautiful. I got them, Ivy, I whispered to the wind. I got them all. The ocean is vast. It swallows secrets and keeps them forever. I drifted for miles, the city lights fading into a distant, glowing smear on the horizon. The adrenaline had finally burned off, leaving behind a profound exhaustion that settled deep in my bones. I wasn't a fugitive running scared. I was a man who had completed his mission. I had scrubbed the stain clean. I docked the boat in a small, forgotten cove 20 miles north of the city. I had a go bag buried there. Cash, a new passport, clothes that didn't smell like gunpowder and old blood. I stripped off my tactical gear and buried it deep in the sand. The sea would take care of the rest. I changed into jeans and a thick flannel shirt. I looked like a fisherman, a nobody, just another face in the crowd. I drove north. I didn't stop until I crossed the border into Canada, and then I kept driving until the trees outnumbered the people. I found a small town nestled in the mountains, a place where the snow fell silent and the world felt hushed. I rented a small cabin. It was simple. A wood stove, a bed, a window overlooking a frozen lake. It's been 6 months now. I don't look over my shoulder anymore. I don't check for exits when I walk into a room. The news reports stopped talking about the shipyard massacre a long time ago. They called it a gang war that spiraled out of control. They said Felix was a corrupt businessman caught in the crossfire of his own greed. They never mentioned a Navy SEAL. They never mentioned a husband. To the world, I am a ghost. A missing person file gathering dust on Detective Miller's desk. But here, in the quiet, I am alive. I spend my days chopping wood and hiking the trails. The physical work keeps my mind steady. At night, I sit by the fire and I talk to her. The snow is beautiful today, Ivy, I say. You would have loved the way it sits on the pines. I don't hear her voice back, but I feel her. I feel her peace. The screaming in my head has stopped. The image of her on the kitchen floor has faded, replaced by memories of her laughing on the beach, her hand on her belly, her eyes full of light. I didn't just take revenge. I took back my memory of her. I purified it. Yesterday, I went into town for supplies. I saw a young couple walking down the street. The woman was pregnant, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. Her husband was guiding her over a patch of ice, his face full of worry and love. For a moment, the old rage flared up. The jealousy, the unfairness of it all. Why them? Why not us? But then, the man looked up and nodded at me. Just a simple, polite nod to a stranger. I nodded back, and the rage vanished. I realized then that I wasn't angry anymore. I had balanced the scales. I had done what the law couldn't do. I had protected the sanctity of what that young couple had. By removing men like Felix and Dominic from the world, I made it just a little bit safer for people like them. I walked back to my truck, the snow crunching under my boots. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was faint, unfamiliar, but it was there. Hope. Not hope for a new life, or a new love. I wasn't ready for that. Maybe I never would be. But hope that one day, when my time finally comes, when the darkness finally closes in for good, I will be able to look Ivy in the eye and say, I didn't let them get away with it. I pulled the truck over by the edge of the lake. I took out the ring one last time. I wasn't going to keep it in a box. It didn't belong in the dark. I walked out onto the frozen ice. I carved a small hole in the surface. Rest now, my love, I whispered. It's over. I dropped the ring into the black water. I watched it sink, a tiny glimmer of gold returning to the earth. I stood there for a long time, the cold wind biting my face, feeling truly free for the first time since I opened that door and smelled the copper. The hunt is over. The soldier can finally rest. Story is finished. Wow.